From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
All right, it's Friday, July 30th, dog days of summer. Welcome to the Macrocast. We're back, John Fagan, Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners. I'm Tony Fratto in New York City. It's like an interesting week. I mean, things that, as you wind down to, people going on vacation, Congress going on vacation, the Chinese never go on vacation. They've
been very busy.
Yeah, we're going to get into their stuff. But, we're heading into August here. We had the last FOMC meeting of the summer before Jackson Hole. We don't call that. It's not an FOMC meeting, but we'll get some commentary there. So we'll get into that. Big news on the infrastructure bill. We got a bipartisan agreement. We'll get into that. We're going to start, I think we should feel pretty confident and start spending a lot of money on roads and bridges and broadband and the grid and all kinds of really good stuff. And then China news. So we'll get into that today too. But first, let's start with the FOMC. And look, my shorthand take on it, guys, is, the chairman said, foot on the gas until we're not, and we're going to go fishing for the rest of summer. Is that about right?
That's about right. Brent and I have been joking that this meeting was almost like the Fed's out of office email, like the auto reply.
That's what it was. It was an out of office message. That's what it was.
Yeah. Obviously, yes. To be fair, obviously not as perfunctory, but it was basically like, "Thank you for your interest in U.S. Fed policy. We're going to be heading to Jackson Hole and enjoying ourselves and monitoring what's going on, but any significant decisions are going to be put off." And that was pretty much bright line right there in the accompanying statement, which emphasized that progress was being made toward the substantial further progress on their mandates, which are full employment and price stability, but that there's a ways to go, which is exactly what Chair Powell said in his testimony recently on Capitol Hill. And it basically kicked it right into the fall, and it said the committee will continue to assess progress in coming meetings, not at the coming meeting, not at Jackson Hole, but at the coming meetings. And that takes you pretty well into the fall.
Because there's no October meeting. There's a September, and then we go November, December.
And that's really consistent with what we've been talking about, which is this September, October, back to school, back to work period with the contending with the Delta variant, which is obviously very
now it's
and
a bigger deal than we thought even a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
It seems almost like a vindication of the chairman to a degree, isn't it? Because he didn't. None of us knew how much of an impact the Delta variant. We still don't really know how much of an impact that it's going to have, but a greater impact than we thought 3 or 4 months ago when he set us on this path. But he did talk about, there are uncertainties with the virus, and while we're going in generally positive direction, there are uncertainties. And as we've discovered in the last couple of weeks, definitely uncertainties now.
Yeah. And September was always going to be essentially a sociological test case where people are going to go back to work and kids are going to go back to school. So why get ahead of that? Why don't you just wait a month or two before you make any large monetary policy decisions to see that it actually happens,
Well, and that's really where it seems the Fed has come out, and that's very understandable. It doesn't mean that Fed Chair Powell was, saying head for the hills, things are looking terrible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
upgraded the Delta
because their economic outlook was actually quite upbeat. They upgraded it.
He made a very salient point that every successive wave of COVID, and this is not our first, the Delta wave won't be our first wave, that every successive wave has had less and less economic impact because of, we're managing it better. And this time it has less, it's obviously a very big issue, but the hospitalizations and mortality rate is dramatically suppressed by the prevalence of vaccines. And, hopefully the Delta spread will get more people interested in vaccination. The incentive structure for vaccines that they're putting in, I think is might as well try it.
Yeah, and also we have gotten a little guidance from the president actually on the vaccines for kids under 12. It seems like this is going to be approved very, very soon.
It's the biggest thing that has to move, I think.
Yeah, it has to move. Yeah.
I mean, when I talk to parents about their uncertainty, they are almost all exclusively talking about because of their kids, that they're vaccinated, they feel confident, but they're concerned about their kids, and that's I think that's fair, and it's going to be an issue. It is going to be an issue for schools. I mean, this does throw us off a little bit with schools in the fall, and so therefore parents and working
exactly
doesn't working from home in the fall again. It's like I think if you had asked me a month ago or 3 weeks ago, I would have said we're going to be back. We're going to be back. And things are going to be pretty much back to normal. There are going to be questions about whether if the guidance is fully wearing masks indoors, and we're still not going to have children, or maybe just starting to get them vaccinated. There are going to be questions in some areas as to whether parents want to send their kids to school or not, whether teachers want to teach in schools with unvaccinated children. And we're going to come back to these insane, mask, anti-mask. No,
I'm with you. A month ago, I was not worried about my kids. I was confident my kids were going back to school. I'm still confident my kids are going back to school, but I'm less confident. But the one thing we actually, unfortunately, have going for us is the Delta variant is so contagious that it might burn itself out in 2 to 3 weeks. And it won't be an issue by the end of August. And we might reach herd immunity,
except for those people who actually get it and
die.
and essentially become breeding grounds for new variants, which is really
that's the risk, right?
Yeah. So it'll be very interesting.
Get vaccinated, people. Go ahead.
Yeah, at the Jackson Hole Symposium, we certainly expect this to be a major topic of conversation. We'll have a lot more data on it by then. And, the title of the symposium this year is Macroeconomic Policy in an Uneven Economy.
Yeah.
Delta is rendering and uneven vaccination rates and an uneven spread of Delta, some of the factors playing into that. So we'll certainly hear monetary policy officials weighing in on that, veering into the lane of public health. It's just unavoidable at this point. It'll be a very interesting Jackson Hole experience.
It is, that is one of the conundrums of big blunt tools like monetary policy, right?
Exactly.
In an uneven economic environment where the economic benefits are unevenly distributed, you can't help but running hot for some parts of the economy in order to get it hot enough for other parts of the economy. And so the more disparities you have, I'm not even talking about income inequality, even just services versus manufacturing, for example, right? I mean, they're like you end up running one really hot just in order to get the other one warm enough. Sufficient economic activity to keep people employed and earning good wages. So those are really complex and interesting monetary policy, macroeconomic problems. So I'll be paying attention. I'm curious to see what they say. But here we are. We're on cruise control until September, when we get to learn a lot more. Anything else on the Fed? Nothing else interesting come out? They did a couple facilities on money markets and.
Oh, on the international side, yeah. I mean, I suppose you have to be a little wonky to enjoy that, but yes, in terms of, it's much to. I suppose grease the wheels to make sure that the global financial system is functioning properly.
And we're all for greasy wheels. We like
exactly
keep spinning. All right, guys, let's come back and we'll take a look at the infrastructure news. You're listening to the Macrocast.
Every 2 weeks, HPS measures U.S. adults' feelings and expectations for the economy. The Civic Science Economic Sentiment Index, powered by HPS, accurately measures movements in overall national economic sentiment and provides a more sophisticated alternative to existing economic sentiment indices. To learn more, contact us through hamiltonplacestrategies.com.
All right, we're back on the Macrocast. Infrastructure Week continues. The real Infrastructure Week. The bipartisan infrastructure framework has become the bipartisan infrastructure deal. 550 odd $billion of spending on hard infrastructure projects. This is, step one of the two-step dance that I think we here are all in agreement are going to end up. We're going to end up with somewhere in the $3 trillion maybe plus range of spending on all the things that you consider infrastructure. But this was the hard infrastructure deal. It won a procedural vote yesterday to move for debate to move forward.
So actually, let me ask you a question on that front. So that was the Senate, and the focus, justifiably so, is on the Senate. So they got that procedural vote. McConnell is not standing in its way. Now, what about the House? Is it going to make it through the House?
So there's a contingent. It's contingent, and the contingency, according to Pelosi, is on movement of whatever a movement of an acceptable reconciliation package through the Senate. And so we've been calling this a two-step dance. There are actually a lot more steps in it. Yeah, because
the tango.
It's more of a tango. Yeah, more maybe of a samba.
Dances that I'm not capable of doing.
You've got because that was you got the clearing the hurdle. Yes, it was a really good signal. You don't vote for continue debate unless you're going to have the votes to pass it. So so that is going to move through the Senate. We should feel pretty confident about that. How and when movement on reconciliation happens is an issue, and they have the anchor of this infrastructure plan, and so now this really, to me, up till this point, it's been a question of what can you do to get 10 Republican senators to go with you? They achieved that. Now the test for Schumer and Pelosi, Republicans are off the field now on reconciliation. For Schumer and Pelosi is what can you get through Sinema and Manchin, Senator Sinema of Arizona, Senator Manchin of West Virginia. That's that's going to be a debate for Democrats, and Republicans are going to have no say in that at all. Because Republicans in the House are not going to vote for reconciliation. Republicans in the Senate are not going to vote for reconciliation. But they're going to have this, the anchor of this piece of the infrastructure bill to play a part here. And then after that, it's going to be a question of whether Democrats want it all or nothing. The thing that they can get through Sinema and Manchin is, I don't know if it's the whole ball of wax, but it will be the only ball of wax available.
It's a really important point.
It is it. That's going to be it.
But it's much less than a lot of the very liberal part of the Democratic Party wants.
Yep. I presume so, right? Yeah. And it's going to be a case of either do you want it all or do you want none of it? But also in the case of Manchin and Sinema do want this infrastructure package. Pro infrastructure. Sinema has a lot invested in it, and Pelosi can say, I'm not bringing your infrastructure package unless you agree to our number on reconciliation.
Yeah.
So this is one of those, negotiations that's actually perfectly balanced.
Yeah.
Perfectly
fascinating.
balanced.
Yeah.
Right, because what Sinema and Manchin have is the reconciliation bill to bring. What Pelosi has, I'm sorry, they have the infrastructure
Yeah.
to visit, but they also have their votes on reconciliation. Pelosi has floor consideration and of either of those bills. And so we're going to see. It's going to be a game of chicken on this. My suspicion is that they'll come to some number that is acceptable to the progressives, a tough vote for Sinema and Manchin on reconciliation, and they move both bills. And
it also goes back to so much of this, our bullishness on these getting passed is because of the 2022 midterm election. So, I mean, it would be very much, now we're not talking about Republicans anymore. We're now talking about inter-party negotiations, and you would just be shooting yourself in the foot if you can't come to some sort of agreement.
Yeah, I think it would be a disaster it would be a disaster for Democrats to show
You're guaranteeing you're going to lose.
The stakes are just way too high for them to let this go. What about the timing, Tony? We were thinking that Labor Day, either side of Labor Day, but now the hurry up offense here with under Senate Majority Leader Schumer has opened the possibility of some real movement before August recess, even if the start of that recess gets delayed. What's your thought on the timing now? You mean,
are you talking about on both or on the infrastructure bill? Because I do think you're right. I do think I think they want to pocket the infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
Just like get this thing pocketed and passed because you don't know what's going to happen. And at the end of the day, like I said, it's an interfamily fight on reconciliation. The one where they absolutely need those Republican votes to hold is infrastructure. So my sense is that they're going to be smart enough to get infrastructure done before recess and just have that in hand so that they're in a negotiation position with Pelosi and Democrats. And so I think it's like infrastructure pre-recess, reconciliation. I'm sorry, Senate passage of infrastructure is pre-recess. It doesn't get to the House until after and until negotiations are worked out on reconciliation with the Senate.
Will they throw the debt ceiling into this bill?
I think they're going. You mean on infrastructure?
Yeah.
I doubt it.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I doubt it. I mean, and now that we're probably looking at October, they're going to put off that ceiling's going to get put off until it absolutely needs to.
Yeah, that's how we do it every time, right?
Yeah, I don't even think it's going to. I actually don't even think it's going to be in reconciliation, to be honest with you.
Amazing. Yeah.
I think you leave it hanging out there and bring us to the precipice again.
Does any other country do this?
And
we create a silly rule where we go to the edge of the abyss every 3 years.
Financial markets have it's lost the scare factor because we've just seen the movie again and again. And, that doesn't mean that interestingly, when I was at Treasury, we had heard from Capitol Hill, from the Democrats on Capitol Hill, when I was running the markets room at the time, why aren't markets responding with greater urgency here? Why isn't there greater risk aversion? Why are they so placid? And we said, well, because it always gets solved in the last minute. And the response was, don't people on Wall Street realize that by assuming that it's going to get fixed, that raises the risk of it not getting fixed? Because the other side will look at markets and say, well, see, the markets don't care. So, it's not this big deal that you think it is. And when it actually, it is.
Let's be clear. If it were to happen, it will not be priced in.
Yeah.
And it will be a sharp
earthquake
fighting reaction.
Earthquake in financial markets.
And I'm tired of trying to convince people of it, to be honest with you. Like it's exhausting every single time to get to debt ceiling and have to go through these insane debates about it. And one day it's going to happen. One day we're going to go through, a few weeks of defaulting on some payments. maybe not on treasuries, but maybe on but maybe other things, holding up Social Security checks, or not paying vendors, or not paying General Dynamics for whatever it's selling to the Department of Defense, whatever it is. And those things are going to go into court as defaults of the United States government. We will default. Now, whether to default on debt is another thing. If we don't have enough cash laying around to pay treasuries, that will be, like
it's unimaginable, frankly. But
it's unmanageable. So you end up downgrading. You downgrade for people to understand what happens. You downgrade U.S. Treasuries, which are the benchmark for all other credit instruments. So everything gets more expensive. Forget about even the shame of it and the insanity of it. Like, what are you maybe we go to the Paris Club and get our debts worked out. Forget about that. But you don't just.
Well, the IMF is based in DC. Yeah. We can just walk over there and ask for help.
Yeah, you raise the cost of borrowing of everything forever, right? Because you have a level of risk that market participants have rightly presumed is nearly non-existent, and you now say it's existent. So you have to price in the risk that the U.S. federal government can be more stupid than you thought, and so you have to price that in. That means credit gets expensive for everyone, everywhere, forever, or for another 100 years. So it's like it's as dumb a thing as anyone can do to play around with, and complacency does make it more likely that it'll happen. So there we are on that. But the infrastructure, though, we haven't spent a lot of time. I mean, other than to say it's pro-growth, hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on things that are going to be around more or less permanently is, should push out the growth curve a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's not an inflation story. This isn't like the 1.9 trillion stimulus checks that were injected right into the veins of the economy. This is a long-term, very long-term spending. There isn't a lot necessarily, and our great guest last week, Norman Anderson, the CEO of CGLA Infrastructure, pointed out that the pipeline. There are a variety of really big issues in translating a bill that is passed into actual, really on the ground infrastructure activity. And one of them is having the projects ready. And we've all talked about shovel ready and that sort of stuff. The project pipeline is relatively thin, but there's also execution. So if you have a big federal infrastructure plan that's supposed to be in some major ways coordinated from the top with consistent themes of
really important
equity and green architecture and energy and sustainability and all that sort of stuff, you have to have a federal level leadership and institution that does that. Yeah. And it's really not clear that the current setup is ready to take those steps. In the past, you would just give money to the states and they would fix what they want to do with them. But that's not it's taken us, that system has gotten us to where we are right now with tons of, U.S. infrastructure.
And the problem with that system is, which is still largely, I mean, the U.S. Surface Transportation Bill still has preserves a lot of that. They try to do they force states to have priority plans that they publish and have, go through a public process to determine what are their priorities and things like that. So they try to improve that. But the problem, again, though, is to your point, John, about giving money to states, is that you don't get as good as we should be on regional transportation.
Exactly.
People don't just drive around their states; they drive across states.
Yeah.
The major.
We have a lot of small states.
Yeah. So they prioritize their in-state transportation, and at the expense of cross-state transportation. It's one of the problems of this federalist system, right? That we. You don't. It's not always the most rational solution. Like you would,
especially when it comes to train.
Absolutely. Now, like you have some, like, I mean, and you end up with these like insane things like the governor of New Jersey, screwing around with the George Washington Bridge, right? I mean, these things shouldn't happen ever. But, and, there is some, cooperation on New York, New Jersey transit kinds of things, but not nearly enough, and not nearly enough in around the country of multi-state transportation solutions where, one state needs an airport, so the other state needs an airport. And it's like, like one airport close to the border would probably be amazing.
Yeah, just put it in the middle.
For everybody, it's like, no, we got to have our own airport.
Yeah.
Then it's got to be an international airport. I mean, we have more international airports than probably, Europe does, but like we've got a bazillion of international airports. Got to get that flight to Canada so we can call it an international airport. It's like, okay.
I flew out of Augusta, Georgia. I think it's technically
Augusta International
Airport.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they got like one flight to Cabo a week.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So like there is we lack some rationalizing there. But that said, you throw hopefully throwing a few $100 billion at some of these transportation problems will make things better in terms of speed and efficiency of moving things. I'm particularly interested in the digital and grid.
And that's an important point. We're not just building bridges. This is the digital infrastructure also, which why we really need an office within the White House that's going to be there forever to help coordinate all this stuff.
Yeah, we've had discussions with some of our friends and Norman about the role of cybersecurity in infrastructure. Guess what? Cybersecurity is infrastructure now.
Yeah, exactly.
It absolutely has to be baked into every single plan that has anything to do with like a digital component to it, that has any sort of connection with the internet and so forth. It's just this is infrastructure, and there are a lot of different examples like that.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. We'll see what we're going to run right up to recess. Next week we're going to get run up to recess on infrastructure, and then Jobs Day next week also. So
a very big one. Yep.
Yeah.
So this is the beginning. I mean, it's the July number. So it's summer hiring and things like that. So we'll get a sense of did people come back into the workforce, or especially restaurants and things like that having a hard time finding people to work.
Well, look, if we've got a worker shortage, by the way, speaking of infrastructure, and we're still not solving immigration, like I don't know how we're going to build all this stuff.
We're just literally, it's just a math problem. We don't have enough people to work if we're going to not allow immigration.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Hey, let's talk. I want to get into China. Let's come back after this break. You're listening to the Macrocast.
On the first Friday of every month, HPS analyzes the latest jobs and labor market data in a digestible format. Sign up for our reports at hamiltonplacestrategies.com or on Twitter at HPS Insight.
All right, back on the Macrocast. So, guys, for as long as we've been paying attention to China, since China has, taken steps to try to become a market economy, and of course their explosive growth over the past 20 years, 25 years.
Yeah.
There's always been this question as to whether the ruling Chinese Communist Party will actually allow Chinese firms to operate in the traditional manner of, globally active multinational companies in all the various ways. And some of that where we, I think, spent a lot of our time focusing our attention in most of the early years of China is whether they would allow them to work with, market rates of capital and, regulations that were comparable to their global competitors, They've maybe made some progress on that. The bigger, more recent questions have to do with whether firms can operate as private firms or whether they're in fact arms of the state. And we're like, they are grinding. Chinese companies are grinding the rest of the world on this right now, and against the demands of the Chinese Communist Party leadership, and especially with the greater emphasis on these things in terms of the, who really runs a company, who has access to information, who's allowed to look at your books, who has access to your data, whose standards are you living up to, ours or theirs. These are all the questions that if you're running a Chinese company today, you have to deal with for whether you like it or not. We get the sense that some of them don't like it at all. And some of them, we don't hear from them anymore because we suspect they don't like it at all. But it's really screwing with the valuation of these companies and their ability to be successful, but also to have normal economic relations between the United States, Europe, and China. And it's an enormous problem. And we saw it come to a head this week with the country's mandates on especially education companies, and the questions of whether they should list in Western markets or not. How are you guys seeing this?
So just to roll the tape back, we've been advising our clients from the time of the Trump administration's turn on China in 2019 to really ramp up the trade. But it wasn't just trade; it was a multi-front campaign to counter China's ambitions on a global stage in IP and the intellectual property transfer tech had national security overtones, obviously. And there was an expectation that, when does this get back to normal? And our advice had been, this is the normal. This is the direction of travel. The consensus in Washington, D.C. has turned so unanimously on this issue that it is a clearly bipartisan. It's a clearly bipartisan understanding in a town that doesn't have many of those. We saw earlier this year the Senate passed the Competitiveness and Innovation Act, which is basically directed at countering China. All of the expanding blacklist at the Commerce Department. We'd been expecting the Biden administration to be as tough, if not tougher, with different set of priorities, greater multilateral coordination in their move against China, but basically taking the Trump administration's ball and running down the field with it on this front. There was, and this is how that's played out. What we didn't necessarily expect was Beijing to play. To play the role that they're playing and make the case that the U.S. regulators have been increasingly making better than they ever could themselves. And basically saying, when you have U.S. regulators saying, the U.S. investors are clearly being exposed to risks that aren't fully appreciated. And then Beijing proving that point again and again over the last few months, that has surprised us. What we thought was, the isolated incident of Ant Financial. Okay, that was a particular case. Beijing weighed in there and threw their weight around and made sure everybody knew who was boss. And the digital renminbi ecosystem isn't going to get a big, the same kind of competition it might from Ant Financial. Well, then there was Didi, and then there was the tutoring companies, and then there was the food delivery, and it has metastasized into what is clearly a regulatory offensive, a campaign against its own private sector. And they had a damage control call yesterday with some of the big Western banks and said, this isn't meant to destroy businesses, but that doesn't mean that's not what's happening. And they injected liquidity into the market. So there's obviously an appreciation in Beijing that this approach has costs, but that doesn't mean that they're going to backpedal seriously on this. I
don't think they will either. I mean, I don't think they fully understand that. So if you're an investor in a Chinese, what do we care, right? I mean, because there are certain pieces of this of things that will continue to be the same. China will continue to be maybe not the world's manufacturing shop, but one of its major manufacturing shops. So absolutely continue to do that. So they can make stuff there, and we can we can buy them here, and we'll probably be happy to continue to invest in those kinds of opportunities. Could continue to produce things for the Chinese market, and that's fine. You know, if GM is going to continue to make Buicks in China for the Chinese market, and
right, yeah,
like, of course they're going to continue to do that. That's not, there aren't huge issues on that. The question is whether any of these Chinese companies are going to become global brands like mostly American and some European big successful global brands are. And if you're not going to allow these companies to operate like the big Western global brands, they're never going to be big Western global or big global brands. They just will not. They will. And so if you were an investor and you bought shares of any of these companies thinking that they were on the precipice of becoming, big global successful brands, you got to knock that down now, because they may still be good. They may still be a going concern. They may still be good businesses in the Chinese market, but that's it. They're not going to be global.
Yeah, and we just got news this morning that the SEC has suspended a Chinese company IPO registrations right now as an institution, the SEC tries to come to grips with how to better explain to U.S. investors the kinds of risks that we're seeing, these elevated risks, the fact that these Chinese companies have no enforceable property rights in their home market aside from what the Chinese Communist Party decides to grant them.
Yeah.
And that is something that, you picture almost like a cigarette warning label slap on the packaging. That's something that as an investor, you absolutely have to appreciate.
Yeah, that's right. And so look, I think it's going to drag on China. I don't know what else you want to. China's not going to put a pin in it. China's not going away. These companies are still going to be, they're going to do business, and China is an enormous market. They're just not going to be as successful as I think their aspirations, but even I think everybody's aspirations, because when you want these companies to be global, you want them to be global because then you impose on China the right way to do business.
But so it's just very dangerous as an investor, because China is basically saying, and it's so much of this comes down to like data, and they're like, if you have data on our citizens, we want access to it. We're not letting you run independent. It's just the reality. Like if you want to know what the Chinese government is doing, just ask them. They're pretty bold about it.
They're pretty open and bold about it. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, guys. I think on all three of these topics, we're going to be back again.
Yeah, they're not going away.
Yeah, it's not going to go. None of them are going away.
Especially the China one.
Talk about them next week, along with Jobs Day. We're going to get non-farm payrolls.
It'll be a fun one next week.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, have a fantastic weekend.
You too.
Okay. See you on the Macrocast.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.